What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video, we are going to do a highlight or an overview or a walk around or whatever title you want to give it on my 1940 Chevrolet Coupe, dubbed Baddass. This is my 1940 Chevrolet Coupe. It's a special deluxe. It was my mentors and my partners, Tom Bradburn. Tom owned this car since 1983. So from 1983, this car was in Tom's hands all the way up until the day he died in 2019. The car was originally brought into Canada by a gentleman named Danny Newcomb. And Danny lived in the Hamilton area. Danny brought this car all the way up from California. Danny turned this car into what we knew, or what the people knew as street sweeper. There's lots of stories about this car when it was in fact street sweeper. Back then it either had a 396 or a 427 with like a Hillborn mechanical injection system on it, which was pretty sick. Danny was the one responsible for the flip hood front end, as well as the initial stainless firewall and the radius rear wheel wells. When Danny sold the car in approximately 1974 to Ted Fletcher Sr., who was in fact a member of the Hamilton-based car club Rodmasters, and at that point, Ted decided that he was going to change up the look of Danny's original version of this coupe and turned it into the first version of Baddass. Ted painted the car white, called it Baddass, and he in fact drag raced it as well. Based on some of the pictures that I've seen of the car, it looks like it went from Danny Newcomb's straight axle to having a drop axle. Ted was tired of people calling it a Bondo box because it was white, and as we all know, when a car is white, that means that it's easy to hide the wrinkles and waves in the body. Knowing that this was an all-steel body, Ted got really fed up with it and stripped it down to the bare steel and painted it metallic black. And that was definitely around 1974, 1975. And then at which point he commissioned Kenny Kay. He painted this car back in the early 70s, mid 70s for Ted Fletcher. And that paint job that he received back then is the same paint job that's on it to this day. And when it was painted black, it became a true show car, in my opinion. Pete Foulds bought the car in approximately 1978, already being painted black. I had a great opportunity to speak with Pete one-on-one when he came up to visit the car at my house, my old house in Guelph. Pete told me that when he had pulled the driveline out of this thing to redo it, he in fact installed a new, completely smooth stainless firewall. Which is still beautiful to this day. A little bit of heat rash on it and that, but it looks pretty good. Pete then had the transmission rebuilt, had the engine rebuilt, put in a cross member on the frame because it was pretty wonky, and he redid the transmission tunnel because he said that you could pretty much shove your foot down between the floorboards and the transmission tunnel, so that was kind of funny. One of the other things that Pete Foulds did on the car was he chromed everything. Chromed the shocks, chromed all the steering rods, chromed the transmission cross member, parts of the rear end were chromed, backing plates were all chromed, all the stuff under the hood that I installed, because of all the chrome underneath the car, I decided that I was going to install fancy pants chrome alternator pump and a polished aluminum water pump. After 1978, Pete only owned the car till about 1981, 1982, and he ended up actually selling it to a guy named John Buchanan in the Caledon area. And from what I've heard, John rebuilt the motor as well. Definitely, if you want to read up any more history of this car, it was in December, January's issue of Canadian Hot Rod magazines. Terry did a fantastic spread on this car. The story that we came up with, the history of the car is really well detailed in that article. It also gives a little bit of an overview about my involvement with Tom at Pre-60s as well. What was some of the work that I did to the car? New reverse Craigers SS rims, front and back, with new Mickey Thompson Sportsman Pros, some very nice sized tires on the back. I did, pretty much we had the heads off, we put a cam in it, put new timing chain, timing gears because they were messed. Polished the intake, polished the valve covers, just to a nice like matte finish. I had the long tube headers here, the fender exit headers that had those ceramic coated, which is pretty incredible if you've ever actually experienced ceramic coated headers before. While the engine's running, you obviously can't touch it, but it's only been off for 10 minutes and it's actually almost, it's barely warm. It is really incredible how that ceramic coating works. I put a new grill in it. I found a grill in Tom's stash, so I put a new chrome grill in it. New wheel cylinders all the way around, new master cylinder, new power steering pump, detailed the power steering box. I had new power steering lines whipped up at my local hydraulic shop in Guelph. New Y-end aluminum water pump, March power steering pump, Power Master single wire chrome alternator, two brand new Holley 450 tunnel rams carbs. It originally had two 650s on it, which is, in my opinion, a lot of carb for just a regular old big block. I put Pertronics ignition in it. It kind of goes against what I do here at Pre-60s because all these cabinets are full of ignition stuff for old cars. I put Pertronics in it just because I knew I wasn't going to be driving a lot. I definitely didn't want to have to be popping the cap off and filing points every 3 months that I tried to start this car up. So I just said screw it and I put the Pertronics in it. I actually kept the distributor that was in it, which is a very cool old Excel distributor from like a Corvette or something like that. Very, very cool, you know, not period correct because this was a car built in the 70s and 80s, but it is a very old distributor, and the bearings in it felt great and the gears looked good, or the gear looked good on it. So we just installed Pertronics and away we went. New fuel pump. We put a Holley Blue pump on it. Inline, new pressure regulator down on the frame down in here. New transmission lines. Transmission cooler actually was out of like a refrigerator, so I actually put a proper oil cooler on the front of it. I tidied up a lot of the wiring. It had a lot of that plastic loom on it and really gross stuff, so I tidied it up and put this nice mesh loom on it that everybody likes using. Well, we redid the fuel system, new starter. Oh yeah, big one, was the axle. So it had a drop axle in it, which I would assume that Tom installed at some point in the 90s or in the 80s, because that was what a lot of cars had that look, was that raked out, you know, front low, ass high kind of a thing. This being the car that it is, and me being the type of guy that I am, I decided that I would put a straight axle in it, and with everything else being chrome on the car, I decided that I would have the front axle chromed. Despite my better judgment, I spent far too much money on that front axle, but it's in and it works the part and it looks great. Well, Pre-60s wise, I had wheel cylinders, master cylinder, kingpins, tie rods, some other stuff, but I can't remember. I had all that stuff in stock for this car, which was really cool. Bearings, I put front bearings in it as well. It's just got like 49 to 54 front spindles on it, so. New thermostat housing, all new stainless hardware on the whole engine, including manifold bolts. I put ARP stainless manifold bolts in it. I resealed the transmission, a couple O-rings here and there, did a transmission filter on it, new fluid, Throttle cable and throttle pedal assembly, which still needs to be finalized a little bit. And when we did the cam, we ended up putting lifters and all that stuff. I had the heads reworked and everything by Jimmy D's in Guelph. There's actually a bit of an issue with the engine, but we're gonna push through it this summer and see what happens. If it grenades, then I guess I'm pulling the motor out again. New tie rods. I ended up having to get this steering arm fixed at a local fab shop up here in Chatsworth. A couple guys I know run a hot rod shop in town, and I had a very good known welder fix the steering arm for me on the passenger side here, because the taper and the hole where the tie rod sat was super sketchy and super thin, and it had been cobbled together, so I had him take it down, reinforce it, and put a couple bungs on it and make it a little bit thicker metal. Feels good to drive it. Okay guys, well, I really appreciate following along. If you've made it this far in the video, I really appreciate your time. Make sure you check out the links in the description below for all my socials, as well as the link to the website where you can see a lot of items that we have for sale, as well as learn a little bit more about pre-60s. Anyways guys, it's been good. Take care. Peace.